It was a crisp Tuesday morning, October 14th, 1958, when the invisible wall separating Harlem from Lower Manhattan was shattered not by a bomb, but by leather suitcases. The location was the majestic main branch of the Hudson and Knickerbocker Trust on Wall Street, a cathedral of capitalism where the floors were marble, the ceilings touched the heavens, and the silence was heavy with the weight of old money. This was a place where Vanderbilts and Rockefellers whispered about bond yields, a place where a black man was only expected to enter if he was pushing a mop or emptying a spittoon. But at 10 a.m. sharp, the heavy revolving doors spun and the atmosphere in the bank shifted from serene to suffocating. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson walked in. He was flanked by 10 men, his board of directors, as he jokingly called them. They were not wearing the flashy zoot suits of the street hustlers. They were dressed in conservative, tailored navy suits that mirrored the attire of the bankers themselves. But there was a difference. The bankers carried briefcases containing papers. Bumpy's men carried 20 oversized, reinforced leather valises that strained their arms with their sheer weight. The security guards, 2 retired Irish cops with weary eyes, stepped forward, hands resting on their holsters. They were used to tossing out drunks, but this was different. This was an invasion, yet there wasn't a weapon in sight. Bumpy raised a hand, a gentle, stopping motion. "We are customers, gentlemen," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the vast cavern of the lobby. "We are here to see Mr. Arthur Sterling. I believe he is the bank president." A hushed silence fell over the lobby. Tellers froze with stacks of bills in their hands. Wealthy patrons in mink coats and top hats turned to stare, their faces a mixture of confusion and indignation. A junior manager, a young man with more ambition than sense, scurried over. "I'm sorry, sir," he stammered, his eyes darting to the imposing line of men behind Bumpy. "Mr. Sterling does not see walk-ins, especially not—" He trailed off, the racial slur hanging unsaid but loud in the air. "Perhaps you would be more comfortable at a branch in your own neighborhood?" Bumpy smiled. It was the smile of a wolf who had found the door to the sheep pen unlocked. "My neighborhood banks are full," Bumpy said pleasantly, "and I have a liquidity issue that requires immediate attention. Tell Mr. Sterling that Mr. Johnson from Harlem is here. Tell him I have brought him a gift." The message was relayed. Minutes later, Arthur Sterling appeared on the mezzanine balcony. He was a man who looked like he had been born in a boardroom, gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a permanent expression of distaste. He looked down at the group of black men in his lobby as if they were mud tracked in on a rug. He descended the marble stairs slowly, flanked by 2 senior vice presidents. "This is highly irregular," Sterling announced, his voice dripping with disdain. "We do not conduct business with criminal elements. I know who you are, Johnson. This is a bank, not a policy shop. I suggest you leave before I call the police." "You could call the police," Bumpy agreed, walking to the center of the lobby right beneath the crystal chandelier. "But I think you might want to see the deposit first. Banks are in the business of money, are they not? Or is there a color requirement for greenbacks now?" Bumpy snapped his fingers. In perfect unison, the 10 men placed the 20 suitcases on the polished marble floor. Thud, thud, thud. The sound was heavy, solid. They crouched down and unlatched the brass buckles. Click-clack. They threw the lids open. A collective gasp went through the room. It wasn't just money. It was an ocean of cash. It wasn't the crisp, large denomination bills of the wealthy. It was the currency of the streets. Hundreds of thousands of $1 bills, 5s, 10s, and 20s. It was crumbled, worn, stained with sweat, smelling of tobacco, fried food, and cheap perfume. It was the numbers money, the pennies and dimes of the maids, the porters, the factory workers of Harlem, accumulated into a mountain of wealth. Millions of dollars. The smell hit the bankers first. It was the smell of labor, the smell of life, It overpowered the scent of floor wax and expensive cologne. $2 million, Bumpy announced, his voice projecting to the back of the room. Cash, immediate liquidity, no checks to clear, no bonds to mature, just raw capital. Sterling stared at the money. His banker's brain was fighting a war with his prejudice. $2 million in cash in 1958 was an astronomical sum. It was enough to capitalize a fleet of ships or build a skyscraper. To turn away a deposit of this magnitude was professional suicide. If his competitors, Chase or Citibank, heard he had refused $2 million in cash, he would be the laughingstock of Wall Street. Mr. Johnson, Sterling said, his voice suddenly less steady. While the amount is impressive, there are protocols. The source of funds, the source is the people of New York, Bumpy cut him off. Now, I want to open an account, a savings account, with interest. The white patrons were whispering. Some looked horrified, but others, businessmen who understood the bottom line, were looking at Bumpy with grudging respect. Money was the great equalizer. However, Bumpy continued, stepping closer to Sterling, invading his personal space with a calm menace, I have heard troubling news. I heard that the Sisters of St. Mary's Orphanage on 135th Street applied for a loan last week. A mere $50,000 to fix their roof and their boiler. Winter is coming, Mr. Sterling. The children are cold. Sterling stiffened. That loan was rejected based on risk assessment. The property is in a declining area. It's redlined. It's bank policy. Policy, Bumpy repeated. He reached into one of the suitcases and pulled out a handful of bills. He let them flutter from his hand back into the case like dry leaves. Here is my policy. You see this money? This is the rent money of the people you refuse to help. This is the grocery money of the women you deny loans to. Bumpy lowered his voice so only Sterling could hear. I will deposit this $2 million in your vault today. It will shore up your reserves. It will make your quarterly report look magnificent. But there is a fee. The fee? Sterling blinked. You pay us fees, Mr. Johnson. Not today, Bumpy shook his head. The fee for my business is the immediate, unconditional forgiveness of the debt owed by St. Mary's Orphanage, and the approval of a $50,000 grant for repairs. Not a loan, a grant. Write it off as charity. It's tax deductible. Sterling's face turned pale. You're blackmailing me. I'm negotiating, Bumpy corrected. If you say no, I close these suitcases. I walk out that door. And I walk 2 blocks down to Morgan Guarantee, and I tell them Arthur Sterling was too stupid to take $2 million in cash because he didn't like the color of the depositor's skin. Imagine the headlines, Arthur. Wall Street Bank turns away fortune. Your shareholders will have your head on a pike by noon. Sterling looked at the money. He looked at the faces of his staff who were mentally calculating the bonuses this deposit would bring. He looked at Bumpy Johnson, a black gangster standing in the center of the financial world, dictating terms to the establishment. The banker realized he was checkmated. The logic of greed was undeniable. Bring the paperwork, Sterling rasped to his junior manager. Get the papers for the St. Mary's account. And the grant letter, Bumpy added helpfully. Typed, signed, with the bank seal. 10 minutes later, the transaction was complete. The money was carted away into the vault by sweating bank tellers. Bumpy Johnson stood at the counter watching Sterling sign the document that saved the orphanage. Bumpy took the paper, folded it neatly, and placed it in his breast pocket next to his silk handkerchief. He didn't shake Sterling's hand. He didn't need to. He had touched the man's soul and found it made of paper. Pleasure doing business with you, Arthur, Bumpy said. He turned to his men. Let's go, gentlemen. The air in here is stale. As Bumpy walked out, the lobby remained silent. The white patrons watched him go. For a brief moment, the racial hierarchy of America had been suspended. A black man had walked into the temple of white power, slapped a fortune on the altar, and bought justice for orphans using the proceeds of crime. The story of the day Wall Street waited was never printed in the New York Times. It wasn't in the bank's annual report. But in Harlem, it was gospel. The nuns at St. Mary's never asked where the money came from to fix the boiler that winter. They just prayed for the angel who sent it. They didn't know that the angel wore a tailored suit and made his living in the shadows. But Bumpy knew. And as he drove back uptown, back to the red-lined district, he smiled. He had proven that while the law might discriminate, the dollar bill was the only thing in America that was truly colorblind.